She spent her last $1,000 on a crumbling airfield. No one wanted, hoping it might be the fresh start her business desperately needed. But when she started fixing up the old hangar, she stumbled onto something far more valuable than land, something hidden beneath the runway that would change everything. Before we dive into this incredible journey, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode takes an even bigger twist. Let's get started. Mara Mitchell stood at the counter of her auto repair shop, staring at the invoice that would be the final nail in her business's coffin. A month's worth of bills, overdue payments, and a pile of broken-down vehicles no one could afford to fix it was all too much. The mechanics of Oak Hollow Auto had been her father's, but now, at 28, it was her responsibility. She had inherited the legacy, but not the customers. She sipped her cold coffee, ignoring the bitter taste. The shop was quiet, the kind of silence that made the walls seem even older, the overhead lights flickering in protest. She needed a miracle. No, not a miracle, she thought. A lifeline. Something bold, something impossible. And then she saw it, an ad on the local classifieds. Abandoned airfield for sale, must sell. $1,000 OBO. Mara had laughed at first. It couldn't be real. An airfield? What could she possibly do with an airfield? But the laughter faded, replaced by a thought that gnawed at her mind. What if she could turn it into something? If she could somehow make a business out of it? Something beyond just a mechanic's shop? A fresh start, an escape from the suffocating debt. She stood up, pushing the coffee cup away, her heart pounding. She grabbed her keys and, without thinking, walked out the door, locking it behind her. The airfield was on the outskirts of town, a 15-minute drive down a dirt road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. She didn't know what she expected to find: some old hangars, maybe a few dilapidated planes, but she certainly didn't expect the eerie feeling that crept over her as she pulled up to the front gate. The place was more than just a field. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, the grass growing wild around the tarmac, the air thick with the scent of rust and forgotten dreams. She could almost hear the hum of aircraft engines in the distance, memories of a time long past. But the gate was open, the sign hanging crookedly from a post. It looked like nobody cared anymore. Her heart raced. This was her chance, wasn't it? She had no plan, no clear vision for how she could turn this place into anything useful, but for the first time in months, a flicker of hope sparked inside her. She drove through the gate and parked near one of the old hangars. The doors were heavy and rusted, but with a little effort, she pried them open. Dust and sunlight flooded the interior, revealing nothing more than the skeleton of an abandoned workshop. Broken tools, empty crates, and a few scattered pieces of old aircraft parts. But there was something else, something strange about the place. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Mara stepped deeper inside, her boots crunching against the dirt floor. Her breath caught when she spotted an old map on the wall, tattered and yellowed with age. The map was marked with red X's and strange annotations. But what really caught her attention was the floor beneath the hangar. A strange outline, almost like something had been sealed beneath it. She knelt down, brushing away the dust. It was a trapdoor, hidden in plain sight. Her pulse quickened as she crouched beside it, running her fingers along the edge. The metal was cold to the touch, and the lock seemed old, too old. But she didn't care. She had already spent her last $1,000 to be here. She wasn't walking away empty-handed. With a little force, the lock snapped open. The door creaked as she lifted it, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the unknown. Mara swallowed hard, her stomach tightening, but she didn't hesitate. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. She stepped forward, feeling the cool air from below hit her face as she descended into the darkness. What was down there? What had been hidden for all these years? Whatever it was, she knew it could change everything. Mara's flashlight flickered as she descended the narrow staircase, the beam bouncing off the stone walls like a nervous heartbeat. The smell of old earth and stale air mixed in the dark, but beneath that was something more, something thicker, more ancient. As she reached the bottom, she paused, taking in the room before her. It was a forgotten world, buried under years of neglect, as if time had simply stopped. The space was vast, far larger than she expected. A series of rusted shelves lined the walls, many sagging under the weight of old equipment she couldn't recognize. There were crates, some broken open, their contents long gone, but others still sealed, collecting dust and shadows. At the far end of the room, a set of large, arched windows let in just enough light to reveal a row of old fighter jets, half disassembled, covered in a thick layer of grime. Her breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what to make of it. A military hangar? A decommissioned airfield storage space? But there was more something about the jets. The machinery, it didn't make sense for the era. These weren't just leftover parts from forgotten planes. They looked like they had been meticulously cared for, maintained and then abandoned, left behind with secrets no one wanted to talk about. Stepping forward, Mara's boots crunched over the dusty floor, her light scanning the room. But it wasn't the jets that caught her attention next. It was a worn leather jacket draped over the back of an old metal chair, facing one of the windows. The jacket was far too well maintained to have been left behind by accident. She walked closer, her mind spinning, trying to piece together what was happening here. Who had been here? Why leave it all behind? As she reached the chair, a soft, rustling sound echoed behind her. Her flashlight snapped toward the noise. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and imposing, his face hidden in the dim light. "Didn't expect anyone to find this place," the man said, his voice low and gruff, almost amused. Mara froze. For a moment, the world seemed to shift, and the years of neglect, the years of isolation disappeared. There was someone here. The man stepped forward, revealing himself fully in the light. He was older than Mara, maybe in his late 52s, wearing a faded green flight suit. His hair was graying at the temples, and his eyes sharp. Clear studied her intently. "I'm Captain Robert West," he introduced himself, offering a hand. "I used to run this field." Mara blinked, unsure of how to respond. You run this place?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He nodded, his gaze softening as he glanced around the room. "Back in the day. But it's all gone now. No more flights, no more engines, just forgotten parts and old memories." He shrugged. "But I guess you're here because you saw something more, huh?" Mara didn't answer immediately, still trying to process what was happening. She had no idea who this man was, but something about him felt real, like he belonged here. She wondered if he was part of the reason the airfield was still standing. "You don't look like the kind of person who just buys empty land," he said, studying her. "What's your story?" Mara hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm just trying to keep my shop open," she said quietly. "I spent my last $1,000 on this place, hoping it would be a new beginning." The captain nodded, as if he understood. "A new beginning, huh? This place has a way of doing that. It's why I'm still here, I guess. Waiting for someone who sees what's hidden in plain sight." "And," she frowned, trying to read him. What did he mean? What was hidden here? He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. "There's more down here than just old planes and machinery. But you've got to be careful. Some things aren't meant to be found." Mara's curiosity burned stronger than her caution. "What do you mean?" she asked, her words barely a whisper. Captain West turned, glancing at the jets again, his expression hardening. "You'll see soon enough. The airfield isn't just a relic, it's a vault. And some secrets, once uncovered, can't be put back." Mara's heart thudded in her chest. She had no idea what kind of secret she had stumbled upon, but the gravity in his words made it impossible to turn back. This airfield, this strange old place, wasn't just an abandoned plot of land. It was something much bigger, and Mara had just opened the door to it. Mara couldn't shake the feeling that Captain Robert West wasn't telling her everything. As he led her through the vast, forgotten hangar, past the rows of dusty jets and abandoned equipment, something about the airfield felt alive with secrets. Every creak of metal, every whispered wind seemed to hold a memory, a story untold. She couldn't help but wonder how much of it was still left buried beneath the cracked tarmac. "Do you know anything about these planes?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady as they moved deeper into the shadows. The more she learned, the more it felt like she had stepped into someone else's world. One where she didn't belong. West glanced back at her, his face unreadable. I worked on them. These planes were part of something big, but that's a long time ago now. He paused, as though deciding whether or not to continue. Most people think this place is just old junk, but I've been around long enough to know that sometimes junk can save your life. Mara nodded, trying to make sense of his cryptic words. How? She asked. How can something like this save me? West smiled faintly, his gaze shifting to the far end of the hangar. Sometimes what's buried beneath the surface is worth more than what's on top, but you've got to be careful. Not everyone who comes here is looking to help. Mara didn't know if she should press him for more answers or let it go. But just as she was about to ask again, a voice interrupted them from the far side of the hangar. You're still hanging around here, old man? The voice was light, mocking, but there was a warmth to it. Mara turned, her heart skipping a beat when she saw who had spoken. A young woman, around Mara's age, stepped out from behind a stack of crates. She was tall, athletic, with a mess of dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, took Mara in with one quick glance before focusing back on West. Mara, this is Ellie, West said, his voice gruff. Ellie, meet Mara. Ellie's lips twitched in a small, knowing smile as she crossed the hangar toward them. I heard we had a visitor. Didn't think anyone still cared about this place. She extended her hand to Mara. Ellie Turner. I help out around here. Mara hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand. Mara Mitchell. I just bought the place. Ellie raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. You bought it? The whole field? Mara nodded. It's a long story, but yeah, I'm hoping to turn it into something. Ellie studied her for a moment before chuckling. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Either way, you're here now, and that's something. West snorted quietly, clearly not entirely convinced by Ellie's lighthearted tone. She's not the first person to come around here thinking they could fix it. She might be the last one to actually have a shot at it. Mara glanced between them, sensing a deeper history between the two. Ellie and West didn't seem like the perfect match, but there was something familiar about their dynamic. Ellie's grin faded slightly as she looked back at West. I'm guessing you're not here to check on the planes, are you? She said, her voice dropping slightly. No, West said, shaking his head. We've got more pressing matters. Ellie didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she turned toward Mara. So, what exactly are you hoping to do with all this? Because just so you know, turning this place into a business is going to take more than a few tools and elbow grease. Mara swallowed, unsure of how to answer. She hadn't thought much beyond getting the airfield in shape for whatever use it could provide. The reality of taking on such a huge project, without enough resources, without enough time, was starting to feel like a weight on her chest. I was thinking about starting small, maybe some storage for planes, or a small hangar for repair jobs. But I'm open to ideas. Anything that could help me keep the shop going. She paused, glancing at Ellie. Do you think there's something here that could work? Ellie studied her for a long moment before shrugging. Could be. But first, we need to make sure we're not just kicking the tires and hoping they turn into something magical. There's more to this place than meets the eye. West stepped forward, his expression serious. There's a reason this airfield's been forgotten. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Some things you find here, you might not want to find. Mara's curiosity flared again. What do you mean? West didn't answer right away. He just gave her a hard look, then turned to Ellie. Tell her about the bunkers. Ellie's face went dark, her smile fading as she nodded. There's more beneath the hangar, a lot more. But if you're serious about staying, you'll need to know what you're getting into. Not everything down there is safe. Some things have a way of keeping their secrets. Mara felt a chill creep up her spine. She had thought this place could be a fresh start, a new chance. But now, the weight of what West and Ellie were saying was settling heavily in her chest. This airfield wasn't just a place to rebuild. It was something else entirely. And Mara was beginning to realize that digging up the past could be far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Mara couldn't sleep that night. The airfield, with its promise of hope, now felt like a burden, a place filled with more questions than answers. Her mind raced as she sat in the small living quarters above the hangar, staring at the blueprint she had roughly sketched on a scrap of paper. She had imagined this airfield as the perfect fresh start for her struggling business. But now it felt more like a ghost town, hiding secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. Her fingers traced the lines of the map again. The main hangar in front, the tarmac that led nowhere, and then, at the back of her sketch, a dark, jagged shape, representing the area West had mentioned, the bunkers. She shivered. The idea of exploring the underground space still haunted her, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something down there might be the key to everything. What was it that Ellie and West weren't saying? What was hidden beneath the floorboards of the hangar that they were so eager to avoid? Determined to take the first step, Mara pushed herself out of the chair, her resolve firming. If this place was going to be anything more than a decaying relic of the past, she needed to face whatever lay ahead. She grabbed her jacket, turned off the lights, and made her way back to the hangar. The night was cold, and the moon cast long shadows over the field, the abandoned planes standing like silent sentinels under the silver light. It felt surreal. This was supposed to be her future. But instead, it felt like she was stepping deeper into someone else's forgotten history. Inside the hangar, the familiar smell of dust and old grease filled her senses. The place was eerily quiet, save for the sound of her boots on the concrete floor. She didn't want to go back to the trapdoor, but it seemed inevitable. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, its beam landing on the same worn metal door that had sparked her curiosity earlier. She stood there for a moment, steeling herself, and then crouched to pry it open once again. The lock clicked and gave way with a reluctant groan, and the door creaked open. Beneath it was the same narrow staircase, leading into the abyss. This time, Mara didn't hesitate. She descended quickly, her pulse quickening as she stepped into the cool, dry air of the bunker below. The room was vast, more so than she'd anticipated. Her flashlight revealed shelves stacked high with crates, boxes of forgotten military supplies, and maps of places Mara had never heard of. But what caught her eye first was a large steel door at the far end of the room, its surface scarred with age but still sturdy. Mara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just an old storage space, it was a hidden vault. What kind of operation had been run here? Who had used this space? And why had it been left behind? Her instincts told her to turn back, to leave it all alone, just like West and Ellie had suggested. But then she remembered why she was here. She needed to make this airfield work. She needed something, anything, that would turn the tide for her struggling business. With a deep breath, Mara walked toward the steel door. She wasn't sure why she was so compelled to open it, but something about it felt like a key to the future she needed to unlock. Her hand rested on the cold metal, feeling its weight, its promise. She gave it a gentle push, and the door creaked open with surprising ease. Beyond it lay a room so unlike the rest of the bunker. It wasn't filled with military remnants or old maps. It was clean, organized, almost sterile. The floor was covered in thick, cushioned mats, and rows of lockers lined the walls. At the far end, a long table stood, covered with intricate plans, blueprints, and strange gadgets that Mara couldn't begin to identify. But there, at the center of it all, was a large, battered briefcase. Its exterior was worn, as if it had been through countless hands, countless years. Mara stepped forward, her heartbeat drumming in her ears as she reached for it. Her fingers brushed the cold metal surface, and she hesitated for just a moment before flipping the latch. Inside, she found more than she had expected. It wasn't just documents or old equipment, it was a treasure trove of records, schematics, detailed maps of airfields she'd never heard of, blueprints for systems she couldn't understand. But then her gaze settled on something far more personal. A photograph, yellowed with age. The picture was of a man grinning, younger, in a flight suit, standing next to a sleek military aircraft. His eyes were familiar, almost haunting. There was no name on the back, but Mara had the strangest feeling she knew him. This was no ordinary pilot. This was someone with history, and maybe even more than that. She turned the photograph over in her hands. Written in a careful, almost trembling script were 3 words. "The key is in the engine." Mara's heart skipped a beat. The key is in the engine? What did it mean? And then it hit her, what if this wasn't just about turning a profit, about fixing the airfield? What if the airfield had been built for a reason far bigger than anything she had planned? She folded the photograph carefully and placed it back into the briefcase. With a deep breath, she knew what she had to do. She wasn't just here to rebuild her shop. She was here to uncover a secret, and no matter what it took, she was going to finish what had been started so long ago. The photograph sat heavy in Mara's pocket as she made her way back to the main hangar, each step carrying the weight of the secret she had just uncovered. The cold metal of the briefcase felt like a tether to a past that wasn't hers, but one that seemed to want her to find it, to complete it. She could feel the urgency in her chest, a pull toward something much larger than the small mechanic shop she had been running. This airfield, this bunker, wasn't just a relic. It was a bridge to something else. Something forgotten. She pushed the steel door closed behind her, trying to keep her breath steady, but the air felt charged, thick with the weight of it all. The hangar around her felt more alive than it had before, every crack in the walls and creak of the ceiling whispering that there was more to be found, hidden just beneath the surface. Mara took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she wiped the dust from her jacket. She had to stay focused. She wasn't here to get lost in the past. She was here to build a future. But even as the thought crossed her mind, something tugged at her again, the need to know, to understand what had happened here. What this place had been. The bunker wasn't just a storage unit for old military relics. It had been a nexus, a hub for something bigger. She could feel it in her bones now. She had to go back down, had to find out everything that had been hidden away for so long. With the briefcase in hand, Mara made her way toward the trapdoor again. This time, there was no hesitation. She knew what she had to do. The cold steel of the staircase greeted her as she descended once more into the darkness, the flashlight in her hand cutting through the air with a steady beam. She wasn't alone in the darkness anymore. The mystery had found her. As she reached the bottom, her heart began to pound harder. The air in the bunker felt even thicker, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her, urging her to dig deeper, to uncover what lay buried. The last thing she needed was another mystery, but the strange energy that hummed through the place wouldn't let her stop. She moved toward the far side of the room, where the row of lockers stood. She ran her fingers over the cold metal, her mind racing. There was something here that would tie everything together, something that would show her the true purpose of this airfield. She had no clue what it was yet, but she had to find it. As she reached for the first locker, the faint sound of a door creaking interrupted her thoughts. She froze, listening. The sound was coming from behind her, from the deeper part of the bunker, the area she hadn't yet explored. Without thinking, Mara turned toward the noise, her flashlight cutting through the dark. There, at the far end of the room, she saw a shadow shift against the far wall, the outline of a door she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a door that should have been there, not one that made sense for the space. It looked newer, as if someone had built it after the fact. Mara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't part of the original bunker. Without thinking, she moved toward it, her pulse quickening with every step. The door seemed to beckon her, its strange, mysterious aura drawing her in. When she reached it, she felt a cold draft coming from the cracks around the frame. The lock was old, but still functional. She didn't hesitate this time. She needed to know what was behind it. With a firm twist of her wrist, the lock snapped open, and the door creaked as it swung inward. What lay beyond was darker than the rest of the bunker, the kind of darkness that felt like it had been hidden for decades. The flashlight in her hand barely illuminated the space ahead. There, in the gloom, Mara saw something that made her stomach tighten. An entire room, filled with rows of crates stacked high and neatly organized. But it wasn't the crates that caught her attention. It was the walls. The walls were covered in detailed schematics, plans, and maps. Everything about this room felt meticulously planned, as if someone had designed it to hold something incredibly important. Her heart skipped as she took a step forward, the sound of her boots echoing in the silence. She scanned the room with her flashlight, noting the military-grade equipment neatly arranged on the shelves, the strange, high-tech instruments that looked like they belonged in a science lab, not an airfield. And then, her eyes landed on a large, reinforced safe in the corner of the room. She walked toward it, every instinct telling her to stop, but she couldn't. There was something magnetic about the safe, something that pulled her toward it. She bent down, noticing the combination lock. There were numbers etched into the metal, faded but still visible. She leaned closer, trying to make sense of them. The faintest memory flickered at the edge of her mind, but it wasn't enough. She needed more time. She couldn't leave without knowing what was inside. Mara stepped back and looked around the room. She wasn't sure where to begin, but there was something about the airfield, about this bunker, that whispered the truth, waiting to be uncovered. She ran her fingers over the schematics on the wall, hoping to piece together what it all meant. That's when something caught her eye, written in bold, precise lettering: Operation Phoenix. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just an airfield. This was a military operation, one that had been buried beneath layers of history. But what had it all been for? And why had it been hidden so carefully? The words, Operation Phoenix, burned into Mara's mind as she stood frozen in the dim light of the bunker. The phrase sounded like something out of a spy novel, but here, in this forgotten airfield, it was a terrifying reality. Her fingers brushed over the schematics on the wall again, the lines and diagrams more intricate than she could comprehend. She had no idea what they meant. But one thing was clear. This place, this hidden bunker, wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a key to something far bigger. Mara's mind raced. What was Operation Phoenix, and why had it been buried so deep? Her hands trembled as she walked toward the safe in the corner, drawn to it with a need she couldn't explain. She knew she had to open it. The secret of this place, the mystery she had stepped into, was locked away behind that steel door, and she wasn't leaving until she had answers. The combination lock was old, but it still worked. Mara ran her fingers over the numbers once more, trying to make sense of them. The etched numbers on the safe were worn, faded from time, but there was something about the sequence that felt familiar, as though she had seen them before. 2, 4, 6, 8. It didn't make sense, but it was the only thing that stood out. She took a deep breath and twisted the lock. The click was deafening in the silence, and the heavy door creaked open. Inside, the safe was filled with folders, documents, and a small metal box that looked far too old to still be intact. Mara's fingers itched to reach inside, but she hesitated. She wasn't prepared for whatever she might find. Instead, she started with the folders. One by one, she pulled them from the safe, their edges crinkling with age. She flipped through them quickly, scanning the first few pages. Maps, diagrams, and strange annotations filled the pages, but it wasn't until she got to the last folder that her pulse quickened. The folder was thicker than the others, its cover stamped with the words "Top Secret." Her heart hammered as she carefully opened it. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, technical jargon, and more schematics. But the last page sent a chill down her spine. It was a letter, dated 1984. To the next steward of Operation Phoenix, if you are reading this, then you have discovered what was meant to be left buried. Operation Phoenix was never meant to be understood by the public. It was a classified project that started with the intention to rebuild, not just planes or engines, but something much greater. The technology contained here is revolutionary, capable of far more than just military applications. It was designed to preserve the future of mankind, using technologies that can manipulate energy, stabilize economies, and even extend life itself. But, as with all great power, there is a cost. Operation Phoenix was never intended for use by anyone without the necessary guidance and understanding of the consequences. The consequences of bringing these innovations to the surface could be irreversible. I trust you will decide wisely. Captain William J. Rhodes. Mara's hands shook as she read the last line. The consequences of bringing these innovations to the surface could be irreversible. What had she uncovered? This wasn't just an airfield, a relic of the past. It was a vault, holding something that could change the world. But irrevocable consequences? That was a heavy price to pay. She sat back on the dusty floor, the letter still in her hands, trying to process the weight of it all. She had come here for a fresh start. But what if the airfield, this bunker, had always been part of something bigger? What if the cost of rebuilding her business was more than she had ever bargained for? The small metal box from the safe glinted in the low light, waiting for her. Whatever was inside, she knew it was connected to this project, to everything that had been hidden here. She stood, her legs weak, and walked over to the box. It was locked, but unlike the safe, this was a simple combination lock, the kind she could open with ease. She twisted the dial, and the box clicked open. Inside, she found a small, ornate device, its surface smooth and metallic, unlike anything she had ever seen before. There were no labels, no instructions, just this strange, compact piece of technology that seemed to hum in her hand. Mara turned it over, examining it carefully. It was too advanced to be from the 82nds. This was something new, something otherworldly. And then, on the bottom, she saw it. Engraved in tiny letters was another message. The key to everything is inside. Trust no one. Her heart sank. This wasn't just a project, it was a weapon. A secret so dangerous that whoever had created it had hidden it away, locked up in a forgotten airfield. Mara stared at the device in her hand. Her breath caught as the weight of what she had discovered finally hit her. She wasn't just reopening a business. She was unlocking a Pandora's box. The bunker had saved her business, sure. But what if it had also damned her future? Mara sat in the dim light of the bunker, the strange device still in her hand. The silence was deafening, every tick of the clock on the wall echoing in her mind. She had come here to rebuild her business, to find a way out of the crippling debt, but now she had uncovered something far greater, something that could change everything. But change what? Her business? Her life? The world? She stared at the device, still unsure of what it was, or how it worked. But the engraving on the bottom haunted her. The key to everything is inside. Trust no one. It felt like a warning, but who had left it? And why? Her head swam with questions, but in that moment, one thought became clear. This was it. This was her chance to save Oak Hollow Auto, to make it something more than just another run-down mechanic's shop. The device might hold the answer, the key to unlocking a future she had never dreamed of. She stood up, shaking off the tension that had built up in her shoulders. If she was going to do this, she needed help. She needed to understand what she was dealing with. And there was one person she knew who might be able to help. Ellie. The young woman had been a constant presence since Mara arrived at the airfield. Ellie had a way of seeing the world differently, of knowing things that Mara couldn't quite explain. If anyone could help her figure out what this device was, it was Ellie. Mara didn't hesitate. She grabbed her jacket and left the bunker, the device tucked carefully into her pocket. The journey back to the hangar felt shorter than before, as though the weight of the airfield had lifted, just a little. Maybe it was the device, maybe it was the hope that now seemed possible. She found Ellie outside, leaning against the hangar door, her arms crossed as she stared out at the field. The sky had begun to darken, the sun dipping low behind the hills. But Ellie was unmoving, as if she had all the time in the world. Mara approached cautiously. Ellie? The younger woman turned slowly, her eyes meeting Mara's. You've been busy, she said with a small smile, her tone light. But there was something in her gaze that suggested she already knew more than she let on. Mara didn't waste time. I found something, she said, pulling the device from her pocket. I think it's the key to turning this place around, but I don't know what it does. Ellie's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Where did you find that? In the bunker, Mara replied, feeling the weight of her words. It was in a safe, and there was a letter, something called Operation Phoenix. Ah, Ellie's eyes narrowed, her brow furrowing as she took a step forward. "You've stumbled onto something far bigger than you realize," she said quietly, her voice serious. "This isn't just about an airfield. It's about something much more powerful." Mara's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Ellie hesitated, then sighed. "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I guess you're in too deep now." Mara waited, her pulse racing, as Ellie continued. Operation Phoenix was more than just a military project. It was an effort to harness energy, technology, that could change the course of human history. This device, what you're holding, could be part of that legacy. It's not just technology, Mara. It's a key to something. Something dangerous. Mara's grip tightened around the device. "Dangerous?" Ellie nodded. "Yes, but not in the way you're thinking. It's not a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It's more of a tool. A tool that could revolutionize industries, change economies, maybe even extend human life. But in the wrong hands, it could cause chaos. It could unravel everything." Mara stared at her, feeling a chill run through her. She had no idea what she had walked into, and now, neither did Ellie. The weight of their situation pressed down on her, but at the same time, something shifted. There was a possibility here. Something that could save everything. "Is there any way to use it safely?" Mara asked, her voice tight with urgency. Ellie's expression softened. "Yes, but it's going to take more than just us. We need resources, people who understand this technology, people who know how to harness it without destroying everything. I know someone. He's been tracking this project for years. He'll know what to do." Mara didn't hesitate. "Then we go to him. We can't waste any time." Ellie gave a small smile, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I knew you had it in you, but we're going to need more than just brains. We need the right kind of help, people who know how to keep this kind of thing from falling into the wrong hands." Mara nodded, feeling a sense of purpose settle over her. This wasn't just about saving her business anymore. It was about something far greater, something that could change the world. "I'm in," Mara said, her voice firm. "Let's do this." The drive to the small, secluded cabin in the hills took longer than Mara expected, the road twisting and turning through dense trees and rugged terrain. She had no idea who Ellie's mysterious contact was, but Ellie had assured her he was the key to understanding the device and the key to saving everything. The uncertainty weighed heavily on Mara, but the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the airfield anymore. It wasn't just about her mechanic shop and the mounting bills. It was about something bigger, something that could change the future of not just her life, but countless others. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ellie parked the truck in front of the rustic home, which sat nestled at the edge of a clearing. It looked like the kind of place that belonged to someone who didn't want to be found just the right kind of person, Mara thought. Ellie glanced at her. "Stay close," she said quietly, her expression serious. "He's not someone who trusts easily." Mara nodded, her stomach twisting with nerves. This was it. Whatever happened next would decide everything. The man inside this cabin had the power to help or destroy the fragile hope she had clung to. Ellie knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness of the forest. It took a moment, but then the door creaked open, revealing a man in his mid-40s. He was tall, rugged, with a worn face and sharp eyes that seemed to assess Mara instantly. "You're early," he said to Ellie, his voice low and rough, but there was a warmth to it that immediately put Mara on edge. "We need your help," Ellie said, her tone urgent. "This is Mara. She's found something big." The man's gaze flickered to Mara, and for a brief moment, she saw something in his eyes, a flash of recognition, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "What is it you found?" he asked, his tone hardening. Mara stepped forward, reaching into her jacket pocket and pulling out the device. The man's eyes locked onto it immediately, his face going still as he took it in. He stepped back, motioning for them to come inside. "Come on in," he said, his voice soft but insistent. The inside of the cabin was sparse, functional, yet comfortable. Maps, blueprints, and books were scattered across a wooden table. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting a warm glow across the room. The man led them to the table, where Ellie quickly set the device down. Mara watched the man carefully as he leaned in, studying the device with a sharp eye. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice tight. "An abandoned airfield," Mara replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "I think it's part of something called Operation Phoenix." The man's jaw tightened at the mention of the name. He looked up at Ellie, then back at Mara. "That name. It's been buried for decades. You shouldn't be messing with it." Mara's heart sank. "But I don't have a choice. This could save my business. I need to know how it works." The man ran a hand over his face, his expression conflicted. "You're right. Operation Phoenix could save your business, but not just in the way you think. It's not about money. It's about what's inside that device." He reached forward, picking it up with care. "This thing holds the potential to change everything. But if you misuse it, if it falls into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything." Mara felt the weight of his words. "What do I do with it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man set the device back down gently, his eyes meeting hers. "You need to understand its purpose. You need to find out who created it, why it was made, and most importantly, who else is looking for it." Mara felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean?" "There are people," the man said, his voice low and guarded, "who have been tracking Operation Phoenix for years. If they find out you have this..." Ellie stepped in, her voice steady. "That's why we came to you. We need you to help us protect it." The man took a long, slow breath. "I'll help you, but it won't be easy. Whoever's behind this project, they'll stop at nothing to get it back. And if they do, all the things you're trying to rebuild will be gone in an instant." Mara's resolve hardened. She wasn't just fighting for her business anymore. She was fighting for her future. And she wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that away from her. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly. The man nodded slowly, then motioned to a large map on the wall. "We need to find the source. We need to track down the people who were involved in Operation Phoenix and uncover the rest of the secrets buried with it. And that means we have to dig deep. But this is your fight now, Mara. I'll help you, but you're the one who has to decide what to do with it." Mara stood in front of the map, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. The airfield, the bunker, the device, this was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. It was no longer just about saving her business. It was about choosing what kind of world she wanted to live in. And she knew now that she would fight with everything she had to protect that future. Mara lay awake that night, the weight of the decisions she had made pressing down on her chest. The cabin was quiet, the soft crackling of the fire the only sound that kept her company. Ellie had gone to bed early, and the man whose name Mara had learned was Victor had retreated into the shadows of his cabin, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. What she had uncovered wasn't just a business opportunity, it was a key to something much more dangerous. Operation Phoenix wasn't just a military project. It was an ancient, well-hidden power, and now it was in her hands. The question lingered in her mind. What price was she willing to pay to secure her future? She couldn't deny that the device, the bunker, and the operation had given her a glimpse of hope. But that hope came with a price, one that could cost more than just money. It could cost her very freedom. The words Victor had said earlier echoed in her mind. Whoever's behind this project, they'll stop at nothing to get it back. Mara had no illusions now. She wasn't just protecting a business. She was protecting something far bigger and much more dangerous. The people who had created Operation Phoenix were powerful, and they weren't likely to let it stay buried forever. She had no idea who they were. But one thing was clear. The game had changed. She wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting for something bigger than her, something that could change the world. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the hills, Mara found herself standing in front of the hangar once again. She had a plan now, one that would take more than just the knowledge she had gained from the bunker. She would need allies, resources, and a team that could help her protect what she had found. Victor had agreed to help, but the risks were still too high. There was only so much he could do from the shadows of his cabin. She needed to act quickly, before anyone else figured out what she had uncovered. The morning air was thick with anticipation as Ellie joined her outside, a quiet look of determination on her face. "We need to move fast," Ellie said, her voice steady. "There's no time to waste. I know a few people who can help us, but we can't afford to trust just anyone." Mara nodded. She trusted Ellie, there was no doubt about that. But Victor's warning echoed in her mind. Trust no one. It was a hard lesson to learn, especially when every instinct told her to rely on those closest to her. But the stakes were higher now. The people after Operation Phoenix wouldn't care who they hurt to get what they wanted. "I'll make the calls," Ellie continued, her voice low. "But we need to stay under the radar. We can't let anyone know what we're really after." Mara turned to face the hangar once more, the sound of her boots crunching against the gravel as she walked toward the entrance. She had spent so many years just scraping by, keeping the business running, trying to hold on to the little bit of legacy her father had left behind. But now, it wasn't just about keeping a shop open. It was about protecting a future that could change everything. "Once we're inside," Mara said, her voice steady, "we make sure no one gets in our way. We finish what we started, and we protect what's ours." Ellie nodded, the fire in her eyes matching Mara's determination. "Agreed, but we're not just fighting for your business anymore. We're fighting for something much bigger, and that means we can't afford to make mistakes." Mara felt the weight of her words settle around her. This wasn't just about rebuilding a shop. It wasn't even about the device anymore. It was about taking control of her destiny, about standing up against whatever forces were behind Operation Phoenix and making sure they couldn't tear everything down. Victor had been right. There was a price to progress, and it was one Mara was finally ready to pay. But at what cost? The sun was high in the sky by the time Mara, Ellie, and Victor had gathered the small group of people they could trust. It was a risky move, bringing strangers into the fold, but Ellie had insisted. These were people who knew how to navigate the kind of danger they were about to face. Some of them were veterans, others were tech specialists, and a few had connections that stretched far beyond what Mara could have imagined. The small crew had arrived at the airfield that morning, their vehicles parked in a half-circle just outside the hangar, where the device and the future of Operation Phoenix were hidden. Mara stood at the edge of the hangar, the cool breeze tousling her hair as she surveyed the group. They were ready. They had to be. Victor approached her, a grim expression on his face. "It's time," he said quietly, his voice laced with urgency. "We can't wait much longer. They'll be looking for it soon." Mara nodded, her heart pounding. She hadn't come this far just to back down. This wasn't just about saving her business anymore. It was about securing the future of everything she had worked for, and keeping the secrets of Operation Phoenix out of the wrong hands. Inside the hangar, the others were already preparing. Ellie had taken charge of organizing the crew, ensuring that everyone had a task. The tension was palpable, but beneath it was something else, a sense of purpose. For the first time in years, Mara felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was building something, a future, a legacy. "Are you ready for this?" Ellie asked, coming up beside her. Mara turned to her, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "As ready as I'll ever be." Ellie's eyes softened. "We've got this, no matter what happens." Mara squeezed her shoulder. "Thank you. I never would have made it this far without you." They stood together, watching as the team moved with quiet precision, securing the perimeter, checking the hangar, and making sure all the entrances were blocked. This wasn't just an operation to save the airfield anymore. It was a full-scale effort to protect the technology that could change the world. At the back of the hangar, Mara stood before the trapdoor again, her heart racing as she prepared to descend into the bunker. The device, the one that had started it all, was still safely hidden inside the metal box, tucked away under layers of protection. But Mara knew that keeping it hidden wasn't enough. She had to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands that would use it for power and control. With a deep breath, Mara pulled the trapdoor open, the familiar scent of earth and metal filling the air. She descended into the darkness, the soft beam of her flashlight guiding her steps. Ellie and Victor followed close behind, their presence a silent promise of solidarity. Once inside, they moved quickly to the reinforced safe. The mission was simple now: secure the device, keep the bunker locked, and ensure that the secret of Operation Phoenix stayed buried forever. The lock on the safe clicked open, and Mara carefully placed the device inside, securing it with a final turn of the key. Her heart pounded as she stood there, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She could feel the gravity of the moment. This was it. The end of one journey, the beginning of another. Behind her, Victor stepped forward, his voice low. "You've done it. You've protected it. Now it's time to move on." Mara turned to face him, the weight of everything they had uncovered still heavy in her chest. But as she looked around the room, the silence of the bunker didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a new beginning. She nodded, taking one last look at the walls of the bunker, at the legacy she had almost lost, but had now restored. "I won't forget this," she said softly. "None of it." Victor smiled faintly, a look of approval in his eyes. "You've done more than just protect it, Mara. You've made sure it won't be misused. That's more than anyone could have hoped for." Mara stepped back, taking in a slow breath. She didn't need to open the bunker again, didn't need to unlock the device. What was more important now was that it was safe. She had done what she needed to do, and with that, the weight that had carried her through the past weeks seemed to lift just a little. The world outside was still uncertain, still filled with challenges, but Mara knew one thing. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that hangar months ago. She had built something more than a business. She had built a future. As the team gathered around her outside, she looked at the airfield, the vast expanse of possibilities stretching out before her. The business, her shop, would thrive. It wouldn't be easy, but it would survive. And the legacy of Operation Phoenix, the mystery and power she had protected, would remain locked away safe for now. Mara smiled, turning to face the crew. "Let's get to work. The future's waiting." And for the first time in a long while, Mara felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be.